We've got another fantastic guest for the show today, and for all of you, thank you everybody for joining us at 390 West Hastings in Vancouver. This is Jeff van Dyck.
How you doing, man?
It's great to meet you, and
Nice to
thank
meet
you
you
for being on the show.
No worries.
You are a former citizen of Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada.
Yes, born and raised.
But you were born here.
Yep.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
There's like 4 people that were born here, and you're one of those people. That's awesome.
That's right.
And you worked at Electronic Arts for a long time. But,
yes, in the early 90s, early mid 90s.
But now you live in Australia.
I do live in Brisbane, Australia.
Which is a beautiful city.
It is.
It's
absolutely
beautiful. I want to include some of the chat members in here. We've just been rushing into the show and getting into these conversations. But yes, if you've got any questions for Jeff, make sure you put it into all caps for us. And it's great to see you, Nintendo Boy, and Adrian Leon, and Rick Savage, and Ty Fish. BL, I did shave. I feel much better. I'll try again later down the road. Okay, let's talk a little bit about Jeff van Dyck's career in music composition and in audio supervision.
Mm-hmm.
How did you get started at Electronic Arts?
Strangely, I answered an ad in the newspaper.
You could do that back in the day.
It was an ad for an audio programmer, actually, and I was so desperate to get the job, to get in to do audio for Electronic Arts. I applied for the job even though I wasn't qualified for it.
Didn't have programming in your background?
I knew a little bit, I knew a little bit of basic, you know, and I figured I could maybe learn it on the go.
You had a VIC-20 and a Commodore
pretty much, you know, TRS-80 or something, you know.
That's awesome.
And I applied for the job. I remember going to the interview and being put into a room full of programmers, and they started asking me all these technical questions, and I said,
when I was a designer at Black Box for 4 months, I had the same experience.
Right. Yes.
Well, it's like they're speaking like a totally different language.
Yeah, and it was clear I didn't know what the hell I was talking about.
Yeah.
But it was also clear to them that I knew what I was doing in audio.
Yes.
Anyway, so went home, got the rejection letter in the mail. Thanks, but no thanks. But 2 weeks later, they phoned me and said, "Hey, we could really use an audio guy now. And we really liked your demo reel and all that sort of stuff. So
that's
come back
great.
in, and I got the job. So it pays to apply for jobs that aren't advertised. You know? So,
it showed that you have the enthusiasm.
Yeah, that was it.
Was EA where you wanted to work? Was that?
Yeah,
because it was
I
a big deal here in the 90s.
It was, right? Because like I was playing NHL hockey on the Sega Genesis.
Yep.
You know, endlessly. Yeah. And I was like, I wish I could do something like I feel like I could do a good job on the sounds of this stuff.
That's
you know,
great.
And I would love to do this. And so, but you know, and I told them that and they were like, yeah, cool. You know, so and I knew, like, I understood how the technology worked in these things. There's basically a synthesizer inside of the Sega Genesis.
Yeah.
And I knew how to program a synth. So you know, it was like. It was like my hobby and skill set matched the job, basically.
That's awesome.
So, yeah.
Did you actually get that dream happening? Were you ever working on the Sega Genesis or the Super Nintendo? Or did
Not
you start
prior to that,
yeah.
but I was very much, you know, prior to that, working in recording studios, ran my own studio, producing music, electronic music. So I was using synths and sequencers and drum machines.
So when you got to EA,
I knew all that stuff. Right?
Were you on cartridges, or did you?
This was cartridges initially. So Sega Genesis was the first thing that I worked on. Actually, I think the very first thing I worked on was the PC port of NHL hockey.
Wow.
Which that was when at one point one of the audio options was the PC speaker.
Right.
Which basically just made one sound. Easy gig. But it was, so that was, NHL hockey on the PC was the very first thing I worked on.
So when you get hired at EA in the 90s and you're in the audio department, what does that entail? Does that mean you're making the music and all the sound effects, everything?
One-man job.
Yeah.
One-man job, did sound effects and music, and then as the technology progressed, then we started doing a bit of voice.
Yes.
Then the CD-ROM came out, and it's like, oh my God, we get to actually produce normal music again.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
But there was something charming about the limitations of, say, a Mega Drive, the Genesis. In Australia, they call it the Mega Drive.
Sure, yeah.
But on the Genesis, you know, it had technical limitations.
Yep.
You know, I think I had 32K of RAM for samples, you know, which is tiny, right? But those limitations make you be creative on how to maximize it, right? So,
were you following Tommy Tallarico? Was my co-host for a long time. Were you following any of his work at all, or
no? I haven't. I'm
no.
not, no.
Okay, because they were doing some. He did the Earthworm Jim game and Aladdin and
yes.
So they were doing some pretty innovative stuff with the
yes.
chips back then.
Yes, that's right.
And so you stayed with EA though,
Yep.
and worked on PlayStation games.
Yep.
How long did you stay at EA?
I was there from 92 to 97.
To 97.
Yep.
And so you left right before we were into the PS2 era and the...
Yeah,
Yeah.
yes, right around then. And I think the last thing I worked on was NHL 99, which
Okay.
we did during 98.
Okay.
NHL, and in fact, I did most of that music in Australia
Right.
because I moved, and I asked if they would keep me on board, like remotely, just for one more project while I get myself sorted over there. And they
With
were
90s internet.
yeah,
That's
yeah.
pretty good.
No, well, no, it was not good enough. Like basically, I did the music and then I flew back and mixed it in their
Oh,
studio.
okay, all
Yeah,
right.
yeah. No, there's no delivering the tracks like there are now. But yeah. No, that was really cool.
That's
Yeah.
really cool of them. Yeah, that's awesome. And how much did your job change when we were talking about CD-ROM delivery of
Oh,
your work?
it was huge.
Yeah.
And like it also kind of sorted everybody's abilities out in amongst the teams. Like some people were really good at dealing with the limited like working with the Genesis,
Yeah.
or Super Nintendo, or like the limitations of that.
Yep.
But then when they were given the whole freedom of working in the studio, you really had to have your studio chops, and some of us had the better chops than others.
Yeah.
So
there was a bit of a culling.
yeah, sort of.
Yeah.
Well, not so much a culling. It's just everybody kind of just was reorganized, I guess.
I always think about that
Yeah.
too, because the 2D games came back after the launch of 3D stuff, and then all of a sudden there were the indies, I think, took hold of
Yeah.
it, and they made a lot of 2D games. And
Yes.
I always think about those 2D developers and the people that were specialists back in the
Yes.
16-bit days. They didn't.
Yes.
They had to kind of learn everything
Yes.
new,
Yes,
right? They had to
that's
like
right.
rub everything away, and it was all from scratch again.
That's right. And also, they were sort of celebrating these limitations, right? They're
Yeah.
making chip tunes and stuff.
Yeah. It's
stems
hot
from all
again.
that. Yes,
Yeah.
it is.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So so you moved to Brisbane, and did you get to work in games right away after you had finished with EA, or what happened then?
So I moved there to actually start again.
Oh, okay.
And start in something different. But I ironically moved about 2 blocks away from EA Australia.
Oh, okay.
Accidentally, I didn't know it was there, and I'm like, wait a sec, I recognize that logo.
And when you lived in
And
Vancouver,
then-
were you in Burnaby? 2
Yeah,
blocks
more or
away?
less.
Yeah, okay.
More or less. And so it was like, something was trying to tell me something. So I went in there and I introduced myself, and they're like, "Oh yeah, we've heard of you," and maybe. So I did do some work with them, and interestingly enough, they were also EA was publishing other developers'
Sure,
games.
yeah.
And one of the developers that they were publishing was Creative Assembly.
Oh, wow.
But the Creative Assembly back then was doing EA sports games, but
Right.
they were doing EA sports games for the Australian market. So we're talking Aussie rules football
Okay.
and cricket.
Wow.
And so I went from doing NHL and NBA and Need for Speed and stuff to Aussie rules football.
Awesome.
And cricket, which was bizarre because I didn't understand how the sport
That's
worked.
great Australian education right
It
there.
was. It
Yeah.
was. It was really good for
Yeah.
that. And then from that, Creative Assembly started. They came to me with this new idea
Yeah.
they had for a strategy game, and they called it Total War.
Yeah.
And in fact, what they showed me was a prototype of Shogun Total War.
Nice.
And they asked me if I could do authentic Japanese music, and I said, sure, no worries. And meanwhile, I'm thinking to myself, I've never done anything like that ever in my life. So
I
was
see
just,
what you say
Yeah.
face to face may not be
Yeah.
everything that's going on behind the
That's-
scenes.
yeah,
I
a
know that
little
about
bit.
you now,
Yeah,
Jeff. Okay.
I mean, I don't mind jumping in the deep end
Yeah.
and learning to swim, right?
No, that's cool.
So that was pretty much exactly what happened.
That's
and
great.
Immediately studied Japanese music, learned a lot about Japanese taiko drums, and
Did the team at Creative and you know what they were in for with the Total War franchise? Like, could you see it in its early days that it was going to become this juggernaut?
I thought it was going to be popular when I
Yeah.
saw it because I'd never seen anything like that before,
Yeah,
and
for
I
sure.
don't think anybody did.
No.
The scale,
since.
the scale of the battles. Also, there's like that particular game, Shogun Total War, is really charming.
Yeah.
Like it's got the playing board has these nice sort of like chess pieces and stuff, and that you move around. There's these really entertaining movies that play when you attempt an assassination. And there's a bit of English humor in there with how the the assassin tries to get to the guy and how he gets thwarted sometimes, and
That's
yeah.
awesome.
So there's
and so
it's a
you punctuated all of that
Oh,
with
yeah.
audio. You did
Yeah,
the
yeah.
music and all the audio effects.
I did
and
that. I think on that one we had somebody helping us with some sound effects out of Sydney. That particular one.
That's cool.
But then and then actually that was around the time where games started getting big enough that you needed more people. So you started getting people who were specialized. So
Right.
you'd get a sound designer who's good at sound effects. There like with the sports games, they would have so much dialogue because we added the dynamic play-by-play.
Sure, yeah.
You'd need a person who was just in charge of the play-by-play and recording the voices and managing that whole process.
Right.
And then the music, and then typically one of these people was also in charge of the whole thing, or if not, if it was just too big, there would be actually somebody who was like effectively an audio director or an audio lead that was in charge. So the team went from being the size of one to around 3 or 4 typically, and then like on a game like Alien Isolation, there was 10 of us, because it was
in audio.
In audio.
Well, when you talk about audio, there's
Yeah.
a game that really lives and breathes around audio because
Yes.
you're in the dark a lot. You're
Yes.
just freaked out a lot. You need the audio like
Absolutely.
crazy in that
Yeah,
game.
yeah.
And what did you do for Alien Isolation?
I was the audio director on that.
So you were
yeah.
getting all of the assets together. And making sure.
Yes, and I mean, and we also had audio leads as well, just to add another layer there. It was that big, so I did basically I conversed with the creative director, got a really good rapport with him,
Yep.
Al Hope, and he had a really clear message about how he wanted it to be CRT, not LCD.
Oh, wow.
Was his
Yeah.
mantra
Sure.
of how the production should be.
Yeah.
I mean, just conceptually.
Yeah.
And it was really great concept, and we just stuck to that.
Oh,
And
aesthetically, it's peerless.
Because
Yeah,
the
it was
it was
incredible.
all about the aesthetic, right?
Yeah.
And because we stuck to that so specifically that it made the audio and it just really come across. Yeah.
So you did about 10 or 12 games or something like that with Creative Assembly?
Yeah, pretty much all the Total Wars up to about Empire Total War, I think I stopped.
Yep.
And then they asked me to come back for Shogun 2, which was appropriate, so I did that. And that's when I hired the taiko drummers, this group in Sydney called Taikos.
Awesome.
And they were really cool to work with.
So recording real taiko
real
drums.
drummers. Yeah, because now there was budget and team size and all that sort of stuff, and it was really cool.
That must
It
be
was
so
really
mind-blowing to have been there in the 16-bit days,
Yep.
where you're just sort of manufacturing everything on a
Yep.
chip, and now you're like you're in Hollywood, man.
Yeah, pretty
Basically,
much.
right?
Yeah, it's amazing, and also like the technology we have now.
Yeah.
And allows us to make it even more interactive than it ever used to be.
Sure.
And all these rhythm-based games.
Yeah.
That are out now, like the technology involved in that and synchronizing everything. It's just awesome, and making the fact that you can make the music change based exactly on what you're doing at any given time. Yeah, it's just awesome.
So you're still based in Brisbane.
Yep.
Is there any desire to relocate or do anything, or is that home for?
It's home. Yeah, I really like it there.
Yeah,
It's beautiful there.
And there's no, resistance to being hired anywhere. Like you can
No,
kind of work for anybody now, right?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. And I work with a lot of indies, and I really like it. Actually, I really like working with the small teams.
Right. Do you see your work get completed a little quicker, and you
It's
see
just
it come to
I
market
guess
a little
with
sooner?
large teams, sometimes you can get caught up in some of the politics that
Yeah,
pop up.
sure, yeah.
When you just get crazy numbers of people, and you can get kind of caught up in the he said she said thing,
Yeah.
and it's just a big waste of time, really.
Yeah, yeah.
So when you're in a smaller indie team, it's more personal, one-on-one. You get to know each other. It's more personal, for lack of a better word.
Well, you've seen it all too, right? Like you've gone through the whole gamut. You were there when it was like the teams at EA would
Yeah.
have been equivalent to an indie developer.
I guess so. Yeah, I mean, like they were. If I think about those teams, were between maybe somewhere between 10 and 20 people
Yeah.
on a team. And then I think, oh God, I can't even remember how many people were on Alien Isolation. I wouldn't be. It would be maybe 100.
Yeah.
If not more.
Yeah.
Everybody involved. So and then coming back down to this tiny team, but
Yeah.
it's really nice actually.
So in addition to the game stuff that you do, you also do movie work and music where you need to, or where you get the opportunity to?
So I don't really do much movie work. I did do one movie.
Okay, okay.
But and I would like to do more.
Yeah, okay. So we're going to say you do movie work.
I am available.
Yeah.
But I mean, I love doing games. I really do.
Yeah.
But I am actually here in Vancouver to launch a album that I've done on behalf of a friend of mine named Saki Kaskas, who I met in the early 90s and I helped him get a job at EA.
Oh, cool.
And he and I wrote a lot of music together on NHL and Need for Speed, and he and I became best buds. And he was working on his album, but his solo album, which was cool. And unfortunately, he passed away in November 2016.
Okay.
And I had just talked to him in October, and he was, trying to finish his album. And I said, hey, I can kind of help you out here. I think maybe we should add some live drums and some singing. It was all instrumental what he had done, and a lot of drum machines and stuff. And I said, let's add some live drums and add a bit more energy to it. And he was really excited about it. And also we hadn't worked together for a long time. And I said, yeah, in 2017 I'll come back into town and we'll do some recording. We're both looking forward to it. And and then unfortunately he passed away. So
I'm sorry.
Yeah, it was rough.
Yeah.
It was really.
But you're fulfilling a promise to a friend.
Well,
here.
yeah, pretty much. Yeah. It just felt like the right thing to do.
That's
for
extraordinary.
Me. And it was, and then so when I started working on it, I thought, I'm going to get a bunch of his old friends to play on it. And so he knew lots of drummers and bass players and singers and stuff, and a lot of them I recorded a bunch of them. I came back in January 2018, I think.
Yeah.
And I was here for a month and went to one of the guys had a studio, and we basically got a bunch of his friends to play on his album.
Awesome. And so now you're mastering it?
It's mastered. It's done. In fact, I'm doing the release party this Friday.
Oh, wow.
At the Anza Club. At 7 p.m. and it's open to the public.
So anybody can go.
Anybody can go
in Vancouver at the Anza Club.
Yep.
You can go to this album launch party. And who was the gentleman that passed away?
Saki Kaskas.
Saki Kaskas.
Yeah.
That's so cool.
Yeah. So it's been that's my music for music's sake. That's not video game or anything.
Yeah.
And
it's a community, right? And do you keep in touch with a lot of the EA folks and the?
There's a few. Yeah. I got my friend Steve here. Who's
actually from EA, but he's a teacher here at the Vancouver Film School.
He is, yeah.
Which is amazing.
Yeah,
okay, this is a bit of a segue, but you worked on Sled Storm. It's one of my favorite classic EA games. It's a total buried treasure on the PlayStation 1. What did you do on that game?
Actually, Rob Bailey, who I think was the audio lead on it, asked me to just write some music for him. And I had relatively recently moved to Australia, and so he asked me to do it. And he had a guy, we had an in-house engineer. Well, they had an in-house engineer named Ken Highwatt Marshall, and he mixed it for me.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I wrote maybe 3 or 4 songs.
So you were like heavy metal type music?
It was like, real high speed, high energy.
Because Rob Zombie's in that freaking
game.
He
is. Yeah, that's right.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it was cool to kind of have some music up beside some of those guys, But I loved that game. Yeah,
it was a totally cool game. It must have been surreal to watch EA sort of become that.
It was interesting.
I had Steve Reckschaffner in here not too long ago talking about the SSX days and the NBA Street Day.
Yeah, well, he had a big impact. I remember when he showed up, because I was there before him, and we were kind of going down the tried and true game franchises. That was the word I was looking for.
Yeah.
And he kind of started saying, but how about this and snowboarding, and it was all
shook things up.
Yeah, I shook things up, and I think EA was probably all the better for it, to be honest.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So what game can we look forward to next from you, or what has just come out?
I'm working on a bunch of games, a bunch of indie games.
Yeah.
So one game that I'm working on that we just released some DLC for is a game called Forts.
Okay.
And Forts, we just released DLC called Moonshot, which adds a bunch of new cool weapons and a new campaign and stuff. I'm working on a game called Unpacking with the crew at Witchbeam, and Unpacking is a game where you effectively you unpack things out of boxes.
You move into an apartment and you unpack things.
Yeah, and
is that true?
Yeah, it's strangely satisfying.
Okay.
Yeah, and it's all pixel art, so it has this really cool look to it.
That's awesome.
And
I love you, indie developers.
Yeah.
That's so cool, right?
And one other game I'm working on is called Paint the Town Red.
Yeah.
That we're working on an add-on pack for that.
This sounds incredibly violent.
It is actually. It's effectively a bar fight simulator.
Okay.
Which has very sort of spectacular, violent blood explosions.
Oh,
so
that's awesome.
It's really cool. Actually.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
All right, my friend. It was fantastic
Oh, it's
to
nice to
have
meet
you
you.
on.
Yeah.
Nice to meet you. Good luck with the album launch party.
Thank you.
That's this Friday at
This
the
Friday
this
at the
Friday
Anza
Anza Club.
Yep.
All right, that's going to do it for EP Live today. I want to thank everybody that came down to watch the show live. Thank you. You all rock. Thank you, and everybody that tuned in. We are going to take a little bit of a break because it's the Canada Day holiday, and I'm going camping. I'm going to be away with my family, so. We aren't coming back until next Wednesday, but we'll have some great guests for you with a brand new EP Live, and there will be still some new content for you to check out on the channel. Thank you to everybody that has tuned in. Richard Grundy, thank you for your help with the lights. You rock, my friend, and it's great to see everybody on the chat, and thank you all. Make sure that you have an awesome weekend, a nice long weekend if you're in Canada, and while you're doing that, play forever. Thank you.
Yeah. Nice job, man.